Hi, so good morning everyone. We'll start off on the agenda with apologies for absence.
Mrs Reeves, Mr Sutton and Councillor Jordan.
Okay, thank you. Declarations of interest. Okay, thank you. Go on to the third item on the agenda to confirm and sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 1st of September 2014. So I'll just go through those. On page 1, any issues there?
Are we just doing accuracy?
Yes. Page 3. And finally, page 4. Okay, we'll say that's an accurate record there. Yeah. It's just referring to the minutes. One of the matters arising on page 2 at the final paragraph. There's a comment there. The chairman agreed that a recommendation be put in place so that members report back from their respective meetings. The head of legal services agreed to discuss this with the head of democratic services. Just find out what happened.
Thank you, Chairman. I have raised that with Tracy Harry, who's the head of democratic services, and I think what will happen is that we'll get our heads together to devise a way to ensure that members report back. There is a facility to report back on the meetings that members are attending. If members recall correctly, and it is some time ago now, back in September, I think Councillor Edwards raised the issue. It's particularly where members are sitting on outside bodies, and is a mechanism in place so that those members can report back to the council about what's going on with those outside bodies. I think that was the issue that the Councillor Edwards was raising. It used to be the case, I'm not sure whether it still is, that any minutes of those meetings were available in the members' library. That's what used to happen at County Hall. Of course, County Hall was a far bigger building than we have here in Usk, so it may not be so easy to organise that, but again, that shouldn't be beyond the, beyond finding a solution. But it is something that's ongoing, and we will try to resolve it. There are some members, I'm aware, who sit on outside bodies, who, if you like, are very efficient at reporting back, letting other members know what's going on the outside bodies that they sit on. But if we can get some consistency, I think that will be beneficial.
Chair, I can only think of one member who regularly does that, and I think that's Councillor Val Smith, yes, on the fire brigades she represents down there.
And county councillors sitting on outside bodies. So it's not, perhaps it's not to the point that you're bringing up there, but I would suggest that if you feel that there are matters that are relevant to you, then obviously a matter for the chairman, but I'm sure that the chairman would consider those matters if he thought it was relevant. Okay.
It might just be something.
I think with these outside bodies, and there is minutes or notes made, I think they should come to democratic services to go on to the full council agenda. I think that would be more reasonable and feasible. So everybody then will know exactly what is happening. because it is disappointing when people are appointed for these outside bodies and don't come back and say anything, so we don't know.
Chair, can I just follow up on that? It would be quite easy, actually, because those of us who are on outside bodies, when we receive the set of minutes for our next meeting, there's no reason at all why we just can't send it direct to Democratic Services Committee, and they can deal with it, or I don't know whether Rob would agree that if it should go on the main agenda to every single report. It might be an idea that should happen.
Yeah, the downside of that, Councillor Edwards, is that the county councils sit on lots and lots of outside bodies, so it would clog the meeting of the county council. That's the downside I can see to it. So it may not be administratively possible, if you like, just through a matter of time. But there's bound to be a way to make members aware about what's going on, and it could be as something as easy as sending minutes to the members of these outside bodies electronically, for example.
This is really what Val Smith does, doesn't it? You know, so if we did that, I'm on one other outside body, so yeah, all I need to really is send it all to all the members, and they can query it from there on.
Chair, if I can come in there, there's also people who sit out on outside bodies and also area committees. There is a coordinating board which we report to as and when. So perhaps if between the coordinating board and with Democratic Services we could marry up so we can get these reports together.
We will come up with some strategy, some process which will ensure better reporting to members of what's going on with these outside bodies.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other matters arising from the minutes? No? Okay, moving on to item 4 then, reports to the monitoring officer.
Thanks, members. 3 reports today. The first report is the substantive part of the report originally went to the Audit Committee in January. The terms of reference of the Standards Committee include looking at complaints out of interest for members. That the terms of reference of this committee are within the Constitution of the Council. They're in Article 9. And part of that encompasses your role in looking at complaints and making sure that the Council does an annual report of complaints to it. So I think as a matter of course now, I will bring on an annual basis the report on complaints that goes to the Audit Committee. Complaints and compliments, for that matter, are obviously very important for the Council. By way of background, if I could just explain, Monmouthshire County Council, together with the vast majority of councils in Wales, operates a model complaints procedure, and that procedure is recommended by the Ombudsman. It's important that councils, for obvious reasons, have an internal complaints process. It's particularly important for the Ombudsman because the Ombudsman normally won't consider a complaint unless the complainant has exhausted the internal complaints process within the council or relevant administrative body. The process here is that where a complainant makes a complaint, that is dealt with at first hand by the officer from the relevant department, the relevant section that the complaint is against. If the complainant's unhappy still with the result of that investigation, then an investigation report is carried out at the second stage by an officer of the council, but not within that department. So there is, if you like, an element of independency on that investigation report. If the complainant is unhappy with that second stage investigation report, then the complainant can make a complaint to the Ombudsman. And that's well within the Ombudsman's jurisdiction. The Ombudsman calls those complaints of maladministration. In the report that you have attached to my report, you will see quite a detailed breakdown of the complaints that the council has faced. Quite interestingly, the most common aspects of services complained about are highways and waste, waste strategy and resources, and development and building control, i.e. Planning. So that's, I think, quite interesting. And as I say, the breakdown of the complaints is quite detailed and covers various areas for each department, including access to service, communication issues, discrimination, member conduct, reduction in service, result of process and staff conduct. From my perusal of these figures before us, the main area of complaint, it seems to be, is quality of service, perhaps not surprisingly, and then communication and also staff conduct. The complaints that social services have are dealt with separately under a social services complaints procedure. Figures are given there on page 13 of your papers, and you will see that 56 complaints were received, 64 comments, and 78 compliments were made about social services. Again, the social services complaints are dealt with on a, if you like, a nationally agreed, via a nationally agreed process. So, Chairman, those are the report is for your information, really. But if you have, or any other members have any comments about it, then obviously I'll record those and take those away as is necessary.
You know, it's the right place to fetch it up. And what I spoke to you about the other day, communication from councillors back to complainants. It was discussed here back a while ago, and I haven't heard any more about it. And I feel perhaps it's something that needs to be put into the code of conduct of councillors with the communication issues. That even if it's a holding letter going back from the councillor concerned to the complainant, you know, within the 28 days, so that at least they know that their complaint has been acknowledged. I was approached last week and asked about this very procedure because this chap had waited for some 4 months for a reply. And as I was coming down here today, I did say I would ask and fetch it up.
Any communication received by the council, by officers, I'll deal with members in a short while, we have sort of corporate standards that we must hit. So within 5 working days of receiving correspondence from a member of the public, the officer should respond. That may be a holding response. And then within 15 working days, the officer should give a substantive response to the correspondence received from a member of the public. Councillors are not within that corporate policy of the council, but we have 2 members here today, so it'll be interesting to hear what their comments are. But I would suggest that councillors work to, and this is a good lawyer word now, a reasonable time scale. But I would suggest that 4 months is really, you know, too long to wait for a member of the public to receive a response from his elected member, and it may be that a member behaving like that could receive a complaint to the ombudsman. If the member of the public doesn't mind you passing that on to me, perhaps I can facilitate and aid with a response, because frankly a complaint to the ombudsman about something like that, he may not consider that. But so if we can do something to aid a speedy resolution of it, then that would be, I think that would be beneficial to all.
Thank you, Robert. I would certainly do that.
You obviously want us to examine. Yeah, I think the normal procedure is quite often complaints come by email, and one responds more or less straight away. You know, it's an easy way out to respond and just acknowledge that you've received it and you'd come back to them in due course. Depending what time of year it is, if it's sort of end of July and you're running into an August period, that can be difficult then, because you may well be going away on holiday, variety of things, so it can stretch out. But generally, I respond ASAP.
Sorry, Chairman. In fairness to members, it can be that the member of the public is actually complaining about a service that the council's receiving, that the member of the public is receiving. So sometimes the councillor will need to have information from the officer before being able to respond. But I suggest it would be good practice if the member just advises the member of the public that, look, I've made inquiries with the council, I'm awaiting a response. As soon as I get it, I'll get back to you.
If I'm right, I think this one, it was a long-standing building complaint, I think, so I didn't inquire too deeply when he said he happened to know I was sat on the standards committee, and asked me to find out, you know, if there was a procedure in place for councillors to reply, as I say, with a holding letter, like, you know, just an acknowledgement of receipt of the complaint. Thank you.
Chair, I agree with Councillor Edwards, but so you can respond as soon as you get an email, or you have to make inquiries yourself before you can respond, and then you have to, when you speak to the appropriate officer, he or she has to investigate as well. So sometimes it can be a fortnight, 3 weeks before they get back to you. But as long as you keep the member of the public informed of what's happening, that should relieve any concerns.
Could I just ask on this, is there any reason why councillors couldn't be subjected to the same periods of 5 working days for a response and 15 days to give a substantive response?
In place that allows that at the moment, and obviously it would be a matter then for the council to agree that procedure, and bearing in mind that the council is made up of elected members, they'll have some say on on the reasonableness of that suggestion. But I could certainly do a report, if that was the wish of Standards Committee, to council to try to get some corporate standards, if you like, in response times.
Chair, I wouldn't disagree with what Robert has just said. I think it's probably a good idea that there is a time scale set down for councillors to do, you know, bearing in mind that what David has just said, which is that the thing has to be referred on maybe to an officer, so you wait for his reply. And there are occasions when they're difficult to get, or should I say the time limits are extended quite considerably on occasion. I've always asked, you know, if I've reported something to our one-stop shops or to an officer, I've always asked them to acknowledge that they've received the email, or the one-stop shop will sort of phone me back and tell me, yes, your complaint is in the, or your query is now in the system. But you are very much dependent then on the officer's feedback, and it may well be things like potholes. We are inundated with potholes, and it's officers obviously, I don't say they get complacent, but it's on the division, they must be up to hearing the complaints on potholes. So that is slower, but then it's up to the member to check it. If I have a pothole in my ward, I regularly drive my ward just looking for potholes, or if somebody's reported it, I just go back there several times until, the job is done. But there is a time scale, and some are considerably longer than others. Does that make sense?
Can I just add, I think it's a good public relations statement to make, just to remind people to be aware. Because when you are the member of the public and it seems nothing is happening, then you just become an aggrieved member of the public. So it would be very good to have a sort of recommendation that a response is made fairly promptly.
Yeah, I don't disagree with what Doug just said, but I don't think it's unreasonable for a member of the public to expect a response from a member, a councillor, because what you've got to take into account, and I'm going to say it, that you've got some members more active than what others are, and to be honest with you, they was elected by the public to do a job, and they should be seen to be doing the job.
Thank you for that. If we can ask Robert to take that forward, then, please.
Certainly. Perhaps what I'll do, Chairman, is put a report together and bring it to the next Standards Committee, bearing in mind we're in election season from the end of this month. We're in what's called PERDA. So if I bring a report to this Standards Committee in June, and then if members are happy with it, or we can make any amendments as necessary, and then I'll put that report to full council in June or July. Is that okay?
Thank you.
Sorry, can I ask a question quickly? This report itself, does that refer to complaints received by the council as opposed to councillors?
Yeah, it is complaints and customer feedback, I think the trendy term is, to the council. Yeah, so it wouldn't include, not necessarily anyway, it may do, but it doesn't not necessarily include responses or correspondence between members and members of the public.
So the substance, so notwithstanding the applicability of the standards to councillors, there's not anything in here that necessarily falls within the purview of the Standards Committee as such?
As I said, within the terms of reference of the Standards Committee, complaints are part of your role to have a look at whether or not there's a complaints procedure in place, have a look whether an annual report is done about the complaints received, and a breakdown and analysis of those complaints. So it is within your area, hence I've brought the report to you today.
I'm not entirely sure how far that goes, but something that doesn't appear to be in the report, I'm sure it's discussed elsewhere, is, for example, it's noted that there's an increasing level of complaints, though that's not broken down by the different types of complaints. It's quite difficult really to spot, speaking as a professional statistician in my day job, it's quite difficult to see trends and what's actually going on in the data here because of the way it's laid out. But if it is within our purview, I want to know a bit more about why the number of complaints is increasing and whether there's anything that we should be doing about that rather than just noting it.
Yes, it may be that complaints arising because of the times that we live in, because of austerity, basically. And members of the public may have, problems with service delivery. That seems to be borne out in my reading of the report. I'm not a professional statistician, but
I think there's a difficulty in this much that's guesswork, with due respect, in the sense that we don't know that, and we can't tell that from this report. And secondly, the complaints have been increasing. It looks from about 2005-06 every year, and with the exception of 6-7, because it looks like some records are missing. But it looks like a longer term trend than since the austerity cuts have hit, and certainly since they've been hitting councils. So I'm not sure that, and even if that were the case, I think we'd need to evidence that rather than just assuming it to be the case. In the long term, over the last nearly 10 years, we've got something like 10 times 3,000% of the complaints that we were getting in the early 2000s. So that feels like something we'd need to know why that is, rather than just noting it and guessing as to why it would be.
Yeah, they are, Gareth, they are, that's information about freedom of information and environmental information regulations requests.
You can,
Could I just say on this, it's nice to have a professional statistician with us, actually. I was just looking through our role as Standards Committee, and it does say, ensuring the Council's complaints procedures operate effectively and publish an annual report on the operation of the system. Well, we've seen the published annual report. The effectiveness of it seems to be the issue at the moment. So is there anything that perhaps Gareth could put forward that may improve the report?
Yeah, it's not very useful figures to me, because I can't see, I've got no context for the numbers, so I can't tell what's getting better and what's getting worse, what the standard is. Is that to be expected? It would also be interesting to see it compared with other county councils. So, for example, it might be that we're doing much better than everyone else. It could be that the number of complaints we're getting per capita is much better. It might be that it's much worse. I've got no context, so just looking at it, it looks like, well, that's the number of complaints. I don't know if that's good or bad, getting better or worse.
I think it's a very valid point. It's where we take it from here.
Well, I suppose better numbers, better breakdowns of the numbers, time series, comparable data or context for the information that we're seeing, I suppose. I mean, there's different ways of doing that.
Yeah, Chair, can I ask Rob, Annette Evans, would she have prepared all these figures?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I
she
think
did.
the simple answer is,
She would have,
can
yeah.
we have it in a different format on the basis that Gareth is on? He's made some very valid points that we should have comparatives of previous years, and also the breakdowns in a particular area. Regeneration, I think, is the largest complaint area, and it would be interesting to see what regeneration in previous years. You're quite right. I think I would support that, and I think that sort of detail, comparative detail, is missing from the report, and it would be extremely useful to have.
Chairman, what I could do is speak to the complaints manager, and with an eye then to, because this is an annual report that she prepares for Audit Committee, take into account Gareth's comments and pass that on to her, and then hopefully, if it's possible, take those comments on board. And it may be, Gareth, I don't know whether you'd be willing to do this or not, but there's a loaded question, this one. If you could help in any way, I'm sure that would be.
I was going to say, I'm guessing as well.
Are there any other comments on that particular issue?
Thank you. On page 17, under planning, the last point there, objectors are invited to all site visits to ensure they can ask questions and clearly state the reasons for their objection. I really seek clarification on that, because some members of the public are under the impression that they are not allowed to ask questions or put their point of view. What they should do is come along to the planning meeting and put their objections. It felt that a small group at a site meeting would be party to complaints, and then perhaps the public didn't attend the planning meeting. So just some clarification, if that is absolutely correct. Thank you.
Again, you've got two planning committee members with us here today, fortunately. Maybe Doug and David can comment on that, and then I'll perhaps give my view on it, if that's okay.
Yes, Chair. I do sit on the planning, and we do go out on site visits. We do have a look, and we have to go with an open mind. No, we don't speak to residents, because it could be classes being contaminated, or changing your mind or whatever before you come into planning meetings. As I just said, you've got to go into a planning meeting with an open mind. And that is what we've always been told, that we're not supposed to speak. We can listen what's being said, but we can't reply. And to be honest with you, Chair, I do get lots of letters through and emails through the post saying, oh, you sit on a planning committee, we would like you to look at this, like you to look at that. You still got to go in with an open mind.
Chair, I'm sorry. Can I come back to the personal issue, personal experience of this one? Some houses being built behind my place, and we had no input into the site meeting, but the developer did, which I felt was totally unfair. It was a rather contentious issue, and although it took 18 months to resolve, the residents actually got their way. But if the developer is there and able to answer questions made by the site visit team, surely to goodness, residents should be directly involved.
No, sorry, Chair, the developer would not be allowed to just ask us questions. We would listen to what he may have to say, just like we would listen to what the objectors had to say. If Graham's got that opinion, then it should not have happened. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, well, I say, because the site visit was directly behind my fence line, I was there, Doug, and I felt most aggrieved that the developer was there and able to put his point of view, and residents weren't. That's a personal issue, and it's just a personal experience.
Chairman, if I could help there. What is extremely important, in fact, more than that, essential for planning committee members, is that, as Councillor Evans alluded to, they have an open mind when they consider that planning application in the planning committee in this chamber. Okay, so members need to be mindful of that. Hence, my understanding of site visits, there isn't any communication, frankly, between the developer, the objectors and the planning committee members. By definition, they are there to view the site, to have a look at the site, to try to get a feel of it for themselves. But there's nothing wrong with the objectors, and indeed it's encouraged, writing to the planning officer. That's the purpose of the planning application notice, so that members of the public in the area are aware that there is a planning application in. If they've got any comments, they need to make those comments to the planning officer. Those comments and objections, if they are objections, or favourable comments indeed, are then included in the planning officer's report to planning committee. So there is a process to ensure that objections are heard and members are aware of those objections. Furthermore, this council adopts a public speaking protocol at planning committee. So if there are 5 or more objections to the development, an objector may speak to the planning committee, and he or she speaks for 4 minutes. So that's an opportunity for those objections to come out before the planning committee considering the application. And indeed, then, if an objector speaks, the developer, the applicant, or his agent can speak also.
Chair. But I say, to me, with this little paragraph here, and I wasn't aware of this in this planning thing that invited to attend, I fully understood that objectors were not entitled to attend site planning meetings. They were private and, council business, and they were there to look at the site on the value of the plans and what they saw. But I say, if you're going to turn around and say objectors can't attend, developers should also not have an input, which is my grievance at the time. And, okay, it's been resolved now, but, if we're going to have a level playing field, let's have the level playing field and have it written in that, the developers are not there to put their point of view or to comment on the councillors go to a site, they look at it, and they make up their own minds without any input from anybody. And if that's the case, that's fair enough. But, if you've got, as I say, if you've got developers there on site with the councillors, it's got, it's got to be perceived as a certain amount of bias. Anyway, but that's it.
Well, sorry, I was just going to sum up to say, I think perhaps the wording ought to be changed in that sentence.
Well, obviously this is a report that's already gone to the audit committee, and that wording, I think, refers to the delegation panel meetings, which cover a certain class of development, And in those meetings, the delegation panel, which is the chairman, the vice chairman of planning committee, and the opposition spokesperson, they, in certain cases, will speak to the applicant and the objectors. So it may be referring to that, but that's for a particular type of development. But I agree with Graham that if an objector was observing from the sidelines a site visit meeting and the developer was there and seemed to be in conversation with the planning officer, with the planning committee, it may be that, you know, there's nothing untoward about that at all, but the appearance certainly is of, you know, well, this isn't a level playing field.
Can I just say as well, in practice, you do what you say you're supposed to do. We had a planning application and you followed it to the letter.
Chair, because of what's been raised here now about the site visit, would it be wise, I'm asking for clarification really, would it not be wise to write to the chair of planning, making her aware of the concerns, and then it can be dealt with when either the next site visit or the next planning meeting?
Thank you, Chairman. It seems that the case that Graham is highlighting here has since been resolved. And I think you said that was some time ago now. Yeah.
From the date of the application to the, there was, what's the term used, something conditioned?
Perhaps, Chairman, to make progress here, this could be discussed with the chairman at our next planning committee, just to make sure that the site visit protocols are being adhered to. It sounds to me as if they are, but we can that would be helpful. I'll do it myself here. Can I ask members who are speaking this morning to make sure you press your microphone? The reason being that triggers the camera because this is being live streamed. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll move on to the next item.
Doesn't do it. On to report number 2 now, members, and the Welsh Government White Paper reforming local government power to local people. This is a huge white paper. I'm not sure whether members have had the opportunity to have a look at it, but it is very, very weighty indeed. There is a consultation on this white paper, and the council will be responding to that consultation, which I think ends on the 28th of April 2015. But I've brought this report to members this morning to give members a flavour of some of the ideas that the Welsh Government is thinking about in relation to local government. Local government, I think, is seen as a bit of a movable feast for the Welsh Government. There are, it seems to be local government seems to be in a constant flux for the Welsh Government. So what I've done is highlight in bullet points things that I think Standards Committee members will find interesting. In particular, at paragraph 3.2, I have reproduced the exact text of the white paper, and the proposal, which I think is rather novel of the Welsh Government, and it's in, as I say, paragraph 3.2, the second paragraph of that, halfway down. There should be a new power for standards committees to consider cases where there are serious concerns that an elected member is failing to fill their duties satisfactorily. So I'm not sure how the Welsh Government proposes that to come about, because on my reading of that, surely that is a matter for the electorate. If your member isn't operating sufficiently well, then that's a matter, I think, for the ballot box. But it'll be interesting to see greater detail and whether or not the Welsh Government proposes to do anything with that idea. Also, it's quite novel in here, in that it's talking about limiting terms for councillors to 5 terms. It'll be interesting to see whether the Welsh Government has a similar rule. 2 terms for leaders and cabinet members. Again, will the Welsh Government have a similar a similar process in place? One doesn't know. But as I say, I must stress that these are ideas at the moment that the Welsh Government is putting forward, putting out there for consultation. And it's all part of the wider local government debate, and the possibility that there will be some form of reorganisation. In my view, that will be a probability. Probably by 2020, local government and councils will look a lot different to what we have at the moment. So that was the purpose of the report. As I say, the white paper is extremely lengthy and weighty, but it certainly is thought-provoking, and there are some interesting ideas in there. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that. I found paragraph 3.1 particularly interesting, the ideas that came up there. And if it's a consultation process, what we as a Standards Committee have to do in response to that, are we actually being consulted now?
Chairman, if there are any comments that you want me to put forward to the Council, I can do that, because Monmouthshire County Council will certainly be responding to this consultation, and if there are any comments that you want me to feed into that process, then I will do so, certainly, and I think that's the appropriate way of dealing with it.
Okay, thank you. If we have any comments on that, please.
Yeah, Chair. On Wednesday of this week, actually, there is a seminar in the afternoon on the white paper. I presume it just says white paper, so I presume that's what we're going to discuss in some detail. And as Rob says, I congratulate him, actually, that he's reduced it to such a suitable proportion to discuss easily. Just some odd things, if you like. views are sought on whether council elections should be phased in thirds. I presume that means we'd have an election every 3, which would, I presume that's I think it'd be, you know, the cost of that would be astronomical, absolute waste of money. So I personally would oppose it. Term limits of 5 terms for councillors, etc. I'd oppose that. I know somebody made the point of a councillor in Blaenau Gwent who's now been there 47 years. Well, you know, he's been re-elected every year. He must be doing a reasonable job, otherwise he wouldn't have been re-elected. You know, and it's a possibility. Review to reduce the level of remuneration, I'd oppose that as well. I think that if certain people take the lead of this council, he probably puts in, 40, 50 hours a week doing that job, and he is certainly not well remunerated for doing those sort of hours. And you know, over recent weeks, we've seen the big debate about an additional money for assembly members. Personally, I got no axe to grind on that. It's the same with MPs. I think that MPs generally, I don't really know the total extent of their expenses, but as far as the pay is concerned, I think it's poor when you consider they've got to run a home in London. Most of them have to run a home in London and a home probably down in their constituency. It's not necessarily an easy way to run your life to have 2 homes. And looking at London prices, I'd hate to think what to rent a flat anywhere near Westminster would cost you. Probably cost you an arm and a leg.
And it's all on expenses, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I've actually asked one of the members to get in touch with our MP to find out exactly what he's allowed to claim for. You know, I got no axe to grind at the moment of what he is claiming for, but I want to know what he's allowed to claim for to get it into perspective. Staff to stand an election, I got no, but they would have to resign. We're quite happy with that situation. And what's the other one I oppose is views to sort whether people should be prevented from holding posts. Yeah, I see nothing wrong with actually holding dual posts as a town councillor and a county councillor. In my own case, and I think David's in the same boat, we're both town councillors. And I find it very beneficial to be on both bodies because as far as there are 5 Abergavenny county councillors, there are 15 town councillors. So and actually all those 5 are on the county, except one, are on the town council. And it means you get the benefit of listening to 10 other councillors. They feed in quite a lot of information. Especially when it's not your own ward, from other wards. So you get that information, very, very useful indeed. So I think it works reasonably well to be on both boards. As far as the high thing that Rob has highlighted, yeah, I think there should be serious consideration given to the situation where members don't attend. I think the qualifications for attendance, you know, if you miss six months completely, you're out, you know, I think you're off. But you could nip along to a local meeting and that would qualify you. And it's those little meetings that, quite frankly, should not qualify you to the safer scheme. You should be attending your main select committees. You should be attending main council meetings. And it's if you miss all those during your tenure of the 6 months, then I think you should possibly be barred and slung off the council.
Yeah, just for members' information there is already a rule in place, as Councillor Edwards alluded to, that if a member isn't present at a meeting of the council for a period of 6 months, there is a statutory bar and the seat is lost. So that already is the law. But a member, there are a huge number of meetings that a member can attend within that 6 month period. So it's, in theory, quite easy to do the minimum possible. But I think my take on that is that, again, surely that must be a matter for the electorate at the end of the day to see what and see the job that their elected member is doing. But as I say, it'll be interesting to see what whether that idea is developed further in any legislation that comes from this white paper.
One other thing, Robert, with, I know talking to people in Abergavenny, there's not a lot of enthusiasm to have another Gwent County Council in the inverted commas, which I think Doug served on. Doug, you served on the old Gwent County Council? No. Oh, but, you know, that that was disbanded because it was too big from on the orders of Welsh. Obviously, small was big, was no longer beautiful. And I think to go along those roads of huge councils again is taking the contact away from local residents. You know, we know, I think the unofficial line is there's no way Monmouthshire wants to amalgamate with Newport. But our voices have been already making noises in Newport about taking over Mager and Undy and things like this, you know, under the Newport Authority wing. You know, which authority can Monmouthshire amalgamate happily with? You know, big is not beautiful as regarding local authorities, local decisions. Okay, have a look at town councils and community councils, but surely to goodness, the residents of a county are entitled to have their own say. I can quite imagine what would happen if Monmouthshire was amalgamated with Newport Authority. The Monmouthshire people would get a really rough deal. You can only see that with this muted hospitals at Cwmbran. Newport wanted in their town centre, a completely impossible place to get at. No consideration at all to the other valleys of it and other areas that served by this council. And that, I'm afraid, is, in my experience on other bodies, is the attitude of Newport County Council.
Agree with some of the responses that Councillor Edwards have made, but I don't agree with some of the others. Firstly, being on a town council and being county councillor sometimes can be impossible, because I sit on planning. So when I go to a planning meeting in the town council, I've got to give my what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, I can't speak, I can't say nothing, because otherwise I'd be accused, you know, of not going into the planning in county with an open mind. I feel there's other items which come up on town council which crashes with county council work, and it makes it impossible to take part in town council or community council. And what we've got to remember is that the people out there put us on there to represent them, and if you can't be seen to be representing them for whatever reason, I think it makes it a bit impossible. Coming down to members' attendance, I disagree with members just turning up for local meetings and not the town council or scrutiny meetings. And I don't think, which is my personal opinion, I think 6 months is too long. I think if they haven't turned up for 3 months, unless it's a very, very good reason, like sickness or something like that, I think they should be investigated. Because what we've got to realise is that county councillors are getting paid. And if they're not turning up for meetings for whatever reason, and as I said earlier on, there's some councillors active, some councillors not. I feel that should be looked in. I agree with Doug on the election phasing in threes. I wouldn't agree to that. And I think that's, and everything else, yeah, I'd be happy with. But I feel very strongly, Chair, on the length of time council members are given for attendance, unless it's a genuine long-time sickness.
Okay, thank you for that. Just looking through the list, what I'm not clear about is people have made comments now on this, but there's a whole list of issues there, proposals for us to consider. whether that's something we should go through item by item or whether it's just listen to general comments.
Chairman, the consultation document is about 30 pages of a tick list, and there is a seminar on Wednesday. Is that Wednesday morning?
No,
It's Wednesday afternoon, and that seminar will be part of the consultation process that this council will undertake in order to respond to complete that checklist and send it back to the Welsh Government. So that's how the consultation process will pan out. But if there was anything specific that Standards Committee wanted me to feed into that consultation process, then my intention was that's what I would do, to tell, if there was anything that Standards Committee members had, particularly strong feelings about, then I could get that back to the officer responsible for dealing with the consultation.
So if we consider each of the items, just go through them and we can eliminate them as we do that. And so if I could ask, on the first page under paragraph 3.1, the relevant proposals for the Standard Committee include roles and responsibilities of leaders and cabinet members. Are there any comments on that? It's actually knowledge of these things in the first place to be able to comment on them. Council leaders to have explicit duties in respect of diversity and standards of behaviour, including bullying and harassment of councillors and staff.
Or explicit duties includes attendance at meetings. And I think this should be pointed out very, very clearly, as has been said.
I think the next item, which is mandatory training, and both those points above it, all will come at that. The first thing that happens to a new councillor is that he goes through a series of training sessions, which are not only open to new councillors, but open to all councillors when they come here to county council. And so all these sort of things are immediately you're made wise to these events, and you must take them on board. So one would agree with all that happening, but it happens, in as I said, in training sessions, which are extremely useful. And training never stops. I think David will tell you as well that it goes on ad infinitum. Things crop up from time to time, and we have seminars on it. Just like now on Wednesday, most of us will be expected to turn up on Wednesday afternoon to discuss this particular government initiative. And I think a couple of days later, there's a seminar on equality impact. So all these things come up and are part and parcel of a county councillor's lifestyle, is to make sure that you're up to date all the time in the legislation that is sort of filtering through from Welsh Government or even from Westminster.
Thank you for that.
Can I just come in on the training? Can I just say the proposals in the white paper are causing great concern for community councils. The government want to see community councils being more ambitious, fewer and larger councils. And as far as training goes, if I can just read you what's been passed to me, the white paper has also raised the proposal that community councils should have to pass a set of competency tests on democracy, capability, capacity and governance. Those that pass will have extra rights and responsibilities, whereas those who don't should look to join with other community councils. And then they're talking about a budget of 200k for all this training. Well, it just seems silly when you've got something and volunteers that are coming forward for community councils close to the community, and they want to change it all. I can't see people volunteering for community councils if this goes through.
Thank you for that. Yeah, very valid point again.
Chair, I think one of the debates that's probably will generate out of this is something which Graham raised about the larger councils. But then places like Monmouthshire, we are already cooperating with, there's 5 or 6 of us counties which have cooperated in the waste disposal, the big burner that they've got down in Cardiff. There's various other things happening all the time. We have close liaison with Torfaen on computers. I know that certain aspects of social services is jointly between the two. It's cheaper for us to run it together rather than each council do its own thing. So a lot of these things are in the process of being evolved. There's the other big thing now is city regions. You know, and city region covers not only Cardiff, it's Cardiff, Newport, and all the, I think it's about 8 different county councils. So that will form a city region, which would, you're looking for economic development, that type of thing. So there's an awful lot going on. Graham is quite right. Newport rejected Monmouthshire. They didn't want to merge with us at all. And we haven't, no, I don't know if we did. We said we would like to discuss it further. But there was a big debate about urban and country. You know, there's a vast difference between Newport City, which is a very urban authority, to ourselves. You know, when you think that they've probably only got, say, 50, 60 miles of roads to look after in their thing. We've got hundreds of miles in our county to look after, just on a simple thing like that. So I think Graham is quite right. I think Monmouthshire would be seriously neglected by Newport.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. I did actually skip over one there when we went on the training. Reduction in number of councillors in line with the UK average. Any
Yes, Chair. Again, going back to the topography of the area, you've got some wards which are rural and sparsely populated, and you have the internal town wards. And can you say, as an ex-postman, I cannot see one council sort of managing to Capra Finn and Forest Culprit and all the other outlying areas. I say my one delivering area in Abergavenny when I was employed with the post office, I was covering 90 square miles on my delivery, which is a heck of a large area. Now, is the council going to be able to keep contact with such a huge area, outlying provinces? In the towns, you've got average of 3,500 to 4,000 residents, which is enough for one council to look after. But you go any larger than that, and you're going to be losing local contact again. So I totally oppose that one.
Yes, Chair, I would agree. I don't think we can reduce councillors as it is at the moment. The work we have and we are supposed to do is right to the line. They think you're a councillor and you get out of bed at 10 o'clock in the morning and you get back in at 7 o'clock at night. That is not true. You're on the go 7 days a week. And you could be looking at your emails, you could be returning phone calls at 8 o'clock in the morning. This morning, 8 o'clock, my phone went. It was to do with a school problem in Calgary. You're on the go all the time. So I don't think if you reduced a council, as it would make the workload more for the ones that's left. So I would have to oppose that as well.
I just correct the average ward is about 1,700. I think that the ambition of the Welsh Government is that the ward should be approximately 1,800 people, 1,800 voters. So the ward, probably with children and all the rest of it, probably up around 2,500 or something of that sort of order. Actually, I'm very fortunate. I represent the Growfield ward in Abergavenny. It's the oldest, I call it the oldest ward in Abergavenny. Most of it is terraced housing, very easy. They are easy to look out. It's very compact. The only snag it is, of course, it's a town centre ward, and therefore it's really a glorified car park as well.
Thank you for that. Just on the training side of it, I know we're coming on to record keeping later on, but having mandatory training is fine. I'm wholly for that, but it's also the record keeping of training. I know on occasion we've asked about councillors what training have they had, and it's been very difficult to determine exactly what courses they've attended, when they've attended them. So unless anyone else has any comments on training.
Can I comment? Every training course or wherever you go on to benefit yourself, it's recorded. You have to sign an attendance sheet. So Democratic Services would have them records. And you know, and to me, I feel that if a councillor hasn't been attending these training courses, I think they should let the political leaders know. Or give them an update on the attendance for the councillors.
I only speak, Chairman, as regards members' code of conduct training. That's extremely important for obvious reasons for members to attend. One of the most important reasons that it is necessary is that if, heaven forbid, a member is alleged to have broken the code, it's one of the first questions the Ombudsman will ask, is when did member X receive training, dates of the training, and what type of training was given. So it is important. Those records of members who have received code of conduct training, we've certainly got those records, definitely.
Okay, I think you're stand corrected.
Has every councillor?
I would say I'd be surprised if they didn't, but they may have attended training. If some members were re-elected, they may have attended training prior to the last election. But I would be very surprised if all members didn't have code of conduct training. And I would...
When you're elected, you're very enthusiastic.
Well, I go on further than that. It's absolutely essential that they receive, training on the code, training on financial regulations, management of budgets, etc.
To me, there's a related point that comes back to a lot of what we've talked about before, particularly in terms of the enhanced powers standards, which is later, which is that it feels like a lot of this stuff probably should be managed just by the electorate. So, I mean, what Rob was saying earlier about if people don't go to meetings and so on, maybe 3 months is reasonable, maybe it isn't, but largely it should be managed by the electorate. I think the difficulty is at the moment, and this is something we've talked about before, it's quite difficult to track these things if we're not sure about this stuff. Certainly the general public and the voters aren't. And I think a lot of this needs to be backed up by better information online. I know they work for you, but I think that only covers MPs. But a similar level of information, it feels like we've got a lot of data, but we're not necessarily making it very easily available. And I'd be keen for, I think a lot of that would help with this. So, for example, training, if there are mandatory courses or nearly mandatory courses, it would be useful for us to have that information well organised and possibly available to the public. I think it specifically mentions conflicts of, what was it called? Sorry? No, well, yes, but I think as importantly, the gifts register.
Oh, yeah.
And things like that should be available, I think, much more easily. So I think a lot of this is manageable by the electorate if we make the information available where currently it possibly isn't. And so that's the thing I think is important. And something we've skipped over is diversity. Again, I'm not convinced we do enough with diversity, particularly in terms of councillors, I'm thinking now. Making sure that the way the council is run helps people with diversity issues in order to be able to join. We've talked quite a lot in the past about the times of these meetings, for example. I'm not convinced that felt like quite a difficult conversation, and one that I think probably should be more thought of in general terms, so that people from different groups are more able to attend meetings and so on.
Interesting comments there from Gareth, Chairman, in that the council was considering the times of its council meeting at the last meeting of full council. And it is, as you quite rightly say, it is a difficult matter. Some of these points that we're going through, Chairman, are already in place. So, for example, training records, members, I think I'm right on this, members need to produce an annual report of their activities, and that's the ideal opportunity, if you like, to put in there what training they've been on. I'm not sure what the take-up is of the annual reporting, but there is already in place a mechanism where that should happen. But I agree, we have loads of information, I think, but it's a matter of putting it in a format and getting it out there so it becomes useful.
Chair, going on the reports, I don't think it's 100%. I don't think it's 50%, and I think it should be compulsory.
Okay, thank you. Certainly on training, I feel that if we as a Standards Committee perhaps put on an agenda for one meeting training records, and we were able to get a list of everyone, we would then confirm that it's actually taking place and it's effective and it's efficient and it's doing all the things that we expect it to do. So it's something to consider, obviously, if they're looking at it at the moment. Just pressing on then, we mentioned in passing, councils will be elected on a fixed 5-year election cycle in line with Parliament and the Assembly. The comment was a waste of time, but any other remarks on that?
Okay. You know, you've got this year, you've got the general election. Next year, you've got the Assembly election. The year following, you've got council elections. What a waste of money. Surely the electorate is intelligent enough now to be able to handle 3 ballot papers on the same day. That's my view.
Okay. Views are sought on whether council elections should be phased in thirds. Term limits of 5 terms for councillors and 2 terms for leaders and cabinet members.
Chair, with the dissatisfaction with the political system in this country it is at the moment, and you've got councillors, as previously been stated, have done 40-odd years and 30-odd years in other councils, apart from this council. These are the people with experience. You know, they're elected year on, year in by the electorate. And you can't kick that out of the window after 5 terms. It's crazy. You know, you've got all the years of experience that are wasted, and people are not going to be interested. It's going to cost more money and all the rest of it.
I think as a counterpoint to that, I'm not sure. I mean, five terms presumably would be 25 years. That feels like a very odd limitation in the sense that we're not bothered about someone being councillor for 20 years, but we are bothered about them being councillor for 28 or 29 years. So it feels like a very large amount of time for us to suddenly place a hard limit on. And I think it depends what we're trying to achieve with it. If it's that we don't want people to be councillors forever because we don't think there's enough accountability, perhaps people don't really know who they're voting for and they're just ticking the red box or the blue box or whatever at the ballot paper, then I think, again, that's not going to be fixed by having fixed cycles. That's going to be fixed by giving the electorate better information so that they can make decisions rather than just blindly ticking the box. But I think there's something else about whether... If you're a councillor for more than 25 years, presumably that means you're a career politician, in as much that you've been a councillor, that's all you've done. And there may be an argument to say that actually we don't want people to make a living being a councillor. It's something that you go into with experience, and if you're still there 15 years later, then perhaps you haven't actually got experience of the working world and other things. I'm not necessarily saying that's true or not, but I can't think of many other reasons why we'd want to put a limitation on in this way.
As a councillor, a town councillor now, I think it's 24 years this year, and I've been now a county councillor for 11 years. I don't think I class myself as a career politician. I couldn't survive on the income that you provide me with. I think a county councillor here, the basic salary, if you can call it so, a basic allowance, is £13,100, something of that sort of nature. There's no way that you could call that a livable wage. It mirrors really the amount of time that you spend doing your work as a councillor. You know, David, as you said, you're called on at any time, night and day. But there's, you know, I suppose the difficulty you face is with the younger councillors. They need we all need. I presume David's retired. I'm retired. You know, I have a pension. I have the old age pension, and with the 13,000 I get from for being a councillor, it means that I can survive, if you like. But I certainly couldn't survive just purely and simply on 13,000 a year, which is what you implied, actually.
I'm not necessarily implying, I'm saying that I can't think of many other reasons why.
There is one issue which probably it's political. It's in a way it's political. You know, the party, because you may be a member of a party, and because you're a member of a party consistently nominates you and puts your name forward. That might be the error, and this is an error where a party should be responsible enough to say, well, look, Joe Bloggs is not attending very frequently, and therefore they should deselect him. And I think that's where it lies. The electorate, that name then goes. On average, the electorate do not know how well or how badly you are performing as a councillor. You know, it's really, but the party does. And I think if you are a political elected a political party, then, you know, obviously it's up to the party to do the deselection. If you're an independent member, and we have something like about 10 independent members on this council, then, you know,
They can't be deselected.
no, they can't be deselected. They were deselected. That's why they're there as independents. So really, it's very much down to the electorate at the end of the day. I think it's this question of whether you should have lists of ladies to make sure that the balance of MPs is right along. It's another debate. So I'm fully in favour of if a person wishes to put their head on the block and become a councillor of some sort, as long as they're doing a good job and the electorate know he's doing a good job, then I'm fully supportive to that councillor, whether he's been there for 10 years or 40 years.
Moving on from that then, enhanced powers for standards committees. This is to make us into... Are there any strong feelings on this one?
Sorry, again, I think it's about the information. So it's making sure we've got the information in order to monitor what we'd be supposed to be monitoring. So if we're supposed to be keeping up with whether members are attending meetings and so on and making reasonable decisions about that, then making sure there's a reporting structure in place for that, because that feels like it's quite a complicated thing to do, and it's something that doesn't really exist at the moment, in that we're quite a reactive committee. We set in place the framework and then we trust that people get on with it unless we hear a complaint, largely. And I feel that it would be quite an administrative burden for us to be able to monitor councillors. I'm not saying we should or we shouldn't, but it does feel like it would be quite a complicated thing to put in place so that we could do it in a constructive way.
Yes, I'd agree. Certainly the reactive and the sort of active type of roles that we perform, it is essentially reactive. A review to reduce the level of remuneration for councillors, leaders and cabinet members.
Yes, Chair. No, I think, Chair, you know, that with all the noise being made at the Welsh Assembly that they've got more work, and all the rest of the county councils also have more work, and as Doug has quite rightly pointed out, £13,000 basic allowance is nothing for the hours that a good councillor puts in. You know, if he's working as he should do, you know, they're down in this place or put it in the workload of 40 to 50 hours a week. And that is not a remunerable, livable remuneration. So, you know, I'm totally opposed to this. You know, if it's good enough for the Assembly, it's good enough for local councillors to have a reasonable remuneration.
Yeah, my reaction is exactly the same. I think the timing of it, with the Assembly members having increases, and their increase doesn't even compare with what the county councils are having. I think they should be grateful for what they've got and the service they get for the amount they've been paid. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that.
Inflation should be taken into account, you know, and you wouldn't have this situation of suddenly they want to give you 10,000 extra a year. If they'd fixed the salary in 10 years ago at a certain level and said this is subject now to an inflation rise, they would have been very much in keeping then with the general public. They'd have got, you know, 1% or whatever it is on a consistent basis, and that's fair.
Speaking as a public sector worker, we haven't had pay rises in line with inflation for quite a long time now. That's been true of politicians in general as well as public sector workers.
Can I put it this way, Gareth? 1% is that's not all you're getting. The Assembly member only gets 1%.
For several years we got a price free, a wage freeze,
Yeah,
so
that's fine.
and then followed by 1%. I don't know what council officers were subject to. I think in terms of pay, it's interesting that the word reduce is in there. A review to look at the remuneration of councillors would perhaps be more neutral. It seems odd that they're setting out with an agenda of reducing it. I'm not entirely sure how an independent review can take place if it's set to reduce things from the off. I'm not saying it should go up or down, but it feels like an independent body would look at it both ways. A couple of times we've touched on the amount of hours that councillors are putting in. I find that interesting given that people do seem to be doing a couple of different roles. So if people are county councillors doing 40 or 50 hours and they're town councillors, that I'm struggling to square that circle a bit. If the hours are too much just to be a county councillor and people are volunteering to be a town councillor as well, then that feels like an obvious way of reducing one's hours. But again, I don't want to talk about pay particularly, except in as much that it probably should be independently assessed with an open mind.
Just for information, Chairman, if I may, at the moment, councillors, I was going to say salary, but councillors' allowances are set by the independent remuneration panel. So it is, and again, there is, you've got to know this stuff, but the independent remuneration panel has got a website. All the annual reports has been in existence, I think, since 2009, and all the reports are there, and it's their recommendation. Well, frankly, it's more than a recommendation. They say how councils, what councillors should receive, and that's been the case, as I say, for a number of years.
Then I'm not entirely sure what the point of this review is, except as a political issue.
Okay, thank you. At the bottom of the page, lift the restrictions on council staff other than politically restricted posts from standing for election to their own authority, although they would have to resign if they were elected. Over the page then, views sought on whether people should be prevented from holding posts as a councillor and assembly member at the same time, or community councillor and county councillor.
We got mixed feelings on that, haven't we? Because I've spoke against it, Councillor Edwards spoke for it, and I feel, to be honest with you, Chair, that what's been said earlier, I've been a town councillor now for 20 years. I've been mayor 5 of that, and I think we should be encouraging the youngsters to come in. Than being on both, and I feel that one of the reasons the younger element don't put up for council is that they think, oh, it's Councillor Evans again. He'll going up against him because he'll get on. automatic and all that. And I think it does seem, and especially when you're a county councillor as well, you know, it obviously feels daunting for them and wasting their time. So I really would go against being on both.
Thank you.
I would agree
Sorry.
with Assembly and County. I think they are not compatible. I think they should be two separate entities. You cannot be a county councillor and an Assembly member. I think both jobs should be of such nature that be unable to do so. As far as town council is concerned, it's very much a lighter job altogether. I think it may well become more important because of the austerity things that are happening. You know, there are many functions at the moment. Monmouthshire has been taking a view to trying to retain the services rather than close them down, but part of that retention is going to be help that they will receive from the community and town councils. And because of that, then obviously town and community councils will play a more important part in future. So that's yet to come. So at the moment, as it stands, I would be quite happy to support county councillors and town councillors, but it may well be in the not too distant future because of the additional responsibilities that a town councillor would need to be a town councillor only and not both.
I'm less worried about the competing priorities as I am potential for conflicts of interest, and also for, as Councillor Evans quite rightly said, the issue of diversity. I do feel like having a relatively small group of people holding a larger, if you like, range of posts is difficult. But also, if towns and councils have different purviews, then presumably there would be cases where what the council wants would be different to what the county council wants would be different to what the town council wants. And it seems like it would be difficult for, if we've got the same people holding typically those two sets of posts. I'm not entirely sure who would win out there, but it seems likely that whichever county council probably would get their way, because the county councillors would take that to the town council. I'm not saying that does happen, but it feels like it is possible.
Right, you've got a conflict of opinion here. As I can say that I don't think we would operate as a community council as efficiently if it wasn't for our county councillor, who was able to give us direction, advice. We certainly trade on the knowledge that they have, and I think we're a better community council because of our county councillor.
Would it be possible, this might be a slightly odd thing to suggest, it does feel like the links between the two are important, even if the same people shouldn't necessarily be both. Should there be a formal role for the county, if you did have this separation where you had completely different people, where you had a role for the relevant county councillor on the town councils or something like that? Because it feels like if you're the county councillor and you sit on one of the town councils, then the other town councils miss out because you're not at those town councils, and therefore perhaps town councils should have a role for the relevant county councillor so that they can still do that without necessarily taking up one of the roles of being a town councillor.
Chair, I see where Gareth's coming from, and there would be no reason why a county councillor couldn't sit with the public and speak in the open public forum to put their input in.
Thank you. The next one, role and responsibilities of the Chief Executive in local authorities defined in legislation, including duties around improvement, corporate planning and promoting democratic engagement. I suppose it's difficult to answer unless you actually know what the roles and responsibilities are at the moment.
I would like to see, I don't know, I don't think he does. I think the Chief Executive should give us an annual report, quite frankly. I don't think we do have an annual report, no. It's as simple as that. So we know what he's managed to achieve, in any 12-month period.
The process in this council is that the chief executive, if you like, has to report at least on an annual basis. I think it's more frequent than that, to the leader of the council. So that's where the sort of challenge comes in. But I think Councillor Edwards is right that there isn't, at the moment, the Chief Executive doesn't report to full council, whereas the other chief officers, and by that I mean the head of social services, in effect, the head of education, the chief officer for education, they report on an annual basis to full council.
Yeah, I don't disagree with what Councillor Edwards said. You know, they're expecting county councillors to put an annual report in, so I can't see no reason why a chief executive couldn't put an annual report in. I take Rob's point that he goes and reports to the leader on 2 or 3, 4 times a year, but the leader's getting that information, not the members.
And Rob is quite right, of course. All the chief officers give a report now. Yes. And they, over the next 2 months, no, as soon as the year is finished, they're all scheduled, because I've seen it on the democratic list of items, that each one in turn will give a full report of their division. And so I see no reason why the chief executive shouldn't do the same thing.
Something slightly related is I think in the last year or two, civil service permanent secretaries, so the heads of civil service departments, have been required to put their personal objectives on the websites publicly available. So again, it looks like they're trying to make sure that their chief executives, for want of a better way of putting it, are accountable to the public in the same way as the politicians. I'm not convinced whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it may be a model that they could look at. So again, making what their chief executives are supposed to be doing, what they're actually doing. Again, perhaps annual reports to council as well, rather than necessarily legislating for their roles. That feels like it would take away, that's something I feel like council should be doing, is to set out what the role of the chief executive may be, and that if you legislate for it, it removes the freedom of councils to do so.
Okay, thank you. The next one, proposed term limits on chief executive appointments. What are they at the moment?
Well, Chairman, there isn't a time limit on the chief executive appointments at the moment. I must admit, I'm not sure how lawful that would be. I think that's potentially challengeable. Yeah. That you could, for example, only be the chief executive of Monmouthshire County Council for 10 years. I think there's a restraint of trade argument there for someone to argue, but we'll see. But at the moment, there isn't a limit. When a chief executive's appointed, he's appointed on a permanent, he or she's appointed on a permanent basis.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any particular views on a proposed term limit for chief executives appointments?
I think, Chair, it's an employment issue. You go for a job, and who's to turn around and say that you shouldn't hold that job for life if you're doing a good job?
Yeah, Chair, I think when we do the interviews for chief executives, in fact any senior officers, they go through a very rigorous interviewing process, and it's up to us at the end of the day to make the right choice. If we made the right choice, invariably we do. And it would seem to be grossly unfair to put a time limit on it. So I'm quite happy to see a chief executive, take his time and have as much time as he possibly wants to represent the authority.
Okay, thank you. And related to that, chief executives to be recruited through a national recruitment process via a public sector appointments commission.
Can I just ask what the current process is, and also related to the previous point, what the current process is if council wanted to sack their chief executive?
If I deal with the latter point first, that's an employment matter that would be governed by the contract of employment. If the chief executive did something that would comprise of gross misconduct, then the chief executive could in effect be sacked. That is extremely unusual, to say the least. I can't think of an example.
I'm thinking more of if we had the chief executive who wasn't performing the role as well as we'd like, perhaps over the course of 5 to 10 years they got bored of the role and started coasting. how is that monitored and how is that administered? I mean, obviously, typically your boss would do that. Chief Executive doesn't have a boss apart from the council. So how does the council fulfil that function?
Currently, that's fulfilled by the leader. As I say, there is a challenge session. Challenge sessions are in place with the leader and the chief executive. So that's at the moment how that's governed.
That would include if performance was...
In theory, it would. In practice, well, that would be a very difficult matter to say the least. But I guess in theory, yes. If the leader felt that the chief executive was underperforming, then obviously an opportunity would need to be given for that to be righted, if you like. That a period of time given for the inadequacies, if you like, to be corrected. But after that, it then becomes a matter, a normal employment matter. As I say, I'm not aware of any example in practice, but in theory that could happen, yeah. Sorry, the second question you had was the current recruitment policy, yeah. So, chief officers, chief executives, they have to be, their posts need to be advertised. So that's the way that the council currently fulfills that process. Now, interestingly, that idea via the Public Sector Appointments Commission, I think, comes from New Zealand, but in New Zealand, it specifically doesn't deal with local government. So that idea that the Welsh Government has picked up on, I think, as I say, it comes from New Zealand, but it doesn't apply to local government in New Zealand.
I assumed it was related to how it was done for current permanent secretaries, who I think are...
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Again, Chairman, on this point, there is a national negotiated, it's by the NJC, I think it's National Joint Council. There is already a process in place where chief executives pay, chief officer pay, any increases in their salary is negotiated on a national level, but that doesn't include obviously the starting salary for the chief officer. It may be what's envisaged. As I say, I don't know how this will come to pass, but that councils or councils will appoint their chief officers on a specific salary, or parameters will be given for that salary. That certainly doesn't happen at the moment. It will be interesting to see whether anything comes of that. It could be that someone like the Independent Remuneration Panel could take on chief executive and chief officer pay as well. I'm not sure how happy they would be taking on with that function, but as I say, we'll have to see.
Chair, that would make a nonsense of the mantra that's been spouted. You need to pay the money to get the right person for the job. And, they're kicking their own legs away when they turn around and saying, that you're not going to get proper fit people to do the job if you're paying them peanut salary. And hence the arguing for their assembly member pay to go up by 10,000 quid.
Can I start by being facetious? I wouldn't pay any chief executive any more than the Prime Minister to start with. And to see some of the awards in Wales, our chief executives, I think, is on 124,000. But in West Wales, there was a recent case, was it 198,000 in Pembrokeshire? And there were some odd difficulties in Caerphilly recently. Yeah, I think that I'm also on the opinion that the chief executive here has not had a salary increase since he was appointed because of the austerity measures that are in place. But how some of these authorities in other parts of the country can justify salaries in excess of 175,000 is beyond me.
Yeah, it's beyond me as well. I think there's a lot of public interest in it, particularly you mentioned about the car, like most people remember that in the papers. So I think from a standards committee point of view, certainly anything that would act as some control on that, I think would be perceived, certainly by the public, as being a good step. So it'd be interesting to see which way that goes.
Chairman, there is a, as Councillor Edwards has spoken about, there is a seminar on Wednesday evening. I'm not sure whether any members of Standards Committee would be interested to attend that seminar. If they were, then I could find out whether or not, you know, the times of it and pass that information on. Entirely up to Standards Committee members.
Okay, we've dwelt quite a long time on this one, but I think the fact that we've been given the opportunity to look at the proposals and being able to make a comment now that is available to anyone to have a look through means we've done our role there.
Just give Robert the opportunity now to feed that information back into the meeting, the seminar which is on Monday afternoon, Wednesday afternoon, I should say.
Okay, thank you. And on to the final thing, monitoring officers update.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, 4 matters comprised within this report. I think, subject to what Standards Committee members say, I think I'm going to start. I'll bring a report to each Standards Committee, a sort of wraparound report. I hope members have found it useful. But the first item in this report is the public interest test of the Ombudsman. I was at a Monitoring Officers Conference on Friday. A representative of the Ombudsman was there, and she confirmed that the Ombudsman will now take on board this public interest test. Members will recall that when the Ombudsman considers an allegation that a member has broken the Members' Code of Conduct, there's a 2-stage test. The first stage is whether or not there's evidence to substantiate the breach of the code. So, if you like, that's an evidential test. And then the second test that he looks at or considers is whether or not that breach would be likely to lead to a sanction. It's that second limb, if you like, of the test that the Ombudsman has expanded upon with a number of paragraphs, and it's on page 29 of your papers. So the Ombudsman says that when applying the public interest test, I consider each of the following public interest factors set out below. These factors are not exhaustive, and not all may be relevant in every case. But looking at the factors, the first one is the seriousness of the breach. For example, has the member brought their authority seriously into disrepute? Secondly, has the member deliberately sought personal gain for himself or another person at the public expense? The third point, are the circumstances of the breach such that the member has misused a position of trust or authority and caused harm to a person? The fourth point, was the breach motivated in any form of discrimination against the victim's ethnic or national origin, gender, disability, age, religion or belief, or sexual orientation or gender identity? The next point, is there evidence of previous similar behaviour on the part of the member? The next point, is the breach such that an investigation or referral to the adjudication panel or standards committee is required to maintain public confidence in elected members in Wales? And the last point, is investigation or referrals to the adjudication panel or standards committee a proportionate response? Namely, would the cost of an investigation or hearing by the Adjudication Panel for Wales or Standards Committee be regarded as excessive when weighed against any likely sanction. The policy background to this is that whilst the Ombudsman has seen a fall in complaints of breaches of the Code of Conduct from county and county borough councils, I think the figure last year was about 240, and this year is 220. The majority of those complaints are coming from town and community councils, and the Ombudsman wants to try to stem the tide of those complaints. County councils and county borough councils, and we have this in place, we have a local resolution protocol. So quite similar to the maladministration complaints process that I talked about earlier, we need to have a local protocol so that the Ombudsman is satisfied that that's been, if you like, exhausted before considering member-on-member, maybe arguable, quite trivial complaints. There isn't a similar process but for town or community councils. I think the Ombudsman will want in time town and community councils to have in place their own local resolution procedures. But that's the purpose behind this slight change in the public interest test. And as I say, hot off the press, the Ombudsman will now be using this public interest test when considering breaches of the code complaints. I don't know whether members have any comments about the proposed changes.
Thank you. I mean, it's always a woman that brings this up, and I know you're all going to sigh when I say the second one, it should be himself or herself. Not just, we don't expect it to be just men. And if I can talk about the one, it's number 5. Is there evidence of previous similar behaviour on the part of the member? That's a question. And it's almost as if he's answered his own question saying, if so, in other words, yes, and the matter complained about is serious enough, then it does use the word I am likely a lot, but in that particular one, I am likely to investigate. Is that legal terminology, or shouldn't there be something a little bit more definite? There was a consequence when there's evidence?
No, I don't think so. I think the Ombudsman's got to keep... this is guidance that he uses. So he's got to keep his options open, hasn't he? So using the word likely, I think, is sufficient. Obviously, if there is evidence of past behaviour of a similar nature and it's serious, then I think it follows that the Ombudsman is likely to investigate and refer the matter to the Standards Committee or Adjudication Panel for Wales. So I think that that test is sufficient.
Sorry, it's the words if so. I think they could be deleted. But that's just an opinion.
Okay, are there any other comments on this paper?
Seems sensible enough to me. I'd be just interested to know whether it would be worth referring closed cases to standards committees or similar. I'm not entirely sure how trivial these things are, but it may be that if we were getting, I mean, they've mentioned about a series of complaints on a similar councillor, but if there's a bit of a tit-for-tat thing going on, then that might be worth the standards committee knowing about, because there might be an issue with that particular council or with that particular area, even if the Ombudsman doesn't wish to address it.
Chair, can I just ask Rob, through you, I've jumped all the way now to page 62, and this question of private health care. Why was it excluded? You know, have you any knowledge? It says that recently my jurisdiction was extended to include self-funded social care and hospice care. However, I cannot investigate private health care unless it's commissioned by the National Health Service. Seems to be a bit unreasonable.
Perhaps we can touch on that. I'll deal with that question when we get to that aspect of the report. Is that okay?
Oh, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, sorry.
Just stick to the public interest.
Hmm?
Public interest test. On the type of tit for tat allegations, the Ombudsman, and by tit for tat I mean if it's a member on member complaint, I think it's pretty certain now that unless it's extremely serious, the Ombudsman just isn't going to investigate it. And there are two reasons for that. The first reason is there's a High Court judgment called Calver that we've spoken to about in the past, and that basically says that members need to have slightly thicker skins, and what goes on in the council chamber can be expected. That, you know, there is political debate. Sometimes tempers, you know, do get rather frayed, but that's sort of political. You know, the slings and arrows of being a politician, I guess. The second element of that is that it's this local resolution protocol. So if there is a member on member complaint, the Ombudsman will expect that local resolution protocol to be exhausted. And if you recall, we have a local resolution protocol here at the County Council, and it does very much put the onus on the leaders of the respective groups to take part in hopefully finding a resolution. What I can say is since the resolution has come into play, I've had about maybe 2 queries, if that, from members. Because you know, they've got in touch with me and said so-and-so said something, and I've referred them to the local resolution protocol, and as far as I'm aware, it's been dealt with via that, and that's what the Ombudsman will expect. And as I say, I think the Ombudsman would like town and community councils to have similar resolution processes in place, so that he hasn't got to, you know, doesn't have to have a look at these complaints, because lots of these complaints he'll choose not to investigate them anyway.
I'm not saying he should. I think it's quite reasonable that he would apply this test. I'm just wondering whether he's interested in whether a particular breach is over and above a particular bar, but that may not be the same bar that we would apply. So, for example, if we had an issue a couple of years ago now, but it felt like every complaint was about Caldicot Town Council, and we were reaching the point where I was beginning to think that we needed to mediate in Caldicot Town Council in some sort of active way. Now, if a lot of those complaints hadn't actually come to our attention because they weren't reaching the bar, that doesn't mean we don't have a problem with Caldicot Town Council. It just means that it's all low-level bickering. That may be something the Standards Committee needs to address, even if it's not something where the Ombudsman would need to perhaps take anything further.
And I think in time, that's the Ombudsman will expect town and community councils to do that. But there is a resource issue for this Standards Committee if that indeed came to pass. If you recall, the Ombudsman went through a process of referring matters to the Standards Committee. So, for example, he would investigate the matter, and if he came to the view, I don't think there's anything in this, but I'll ask the monitoring officer anyway. That was almost universally unpopular with monitoring officers in Wales, but in fairness to Murray, he did bring a matter to you, and you decided to investigate it. The Ombudsman is now no longer going to carry out that process, so basically he's going back to the old way, that where he considers something shouldn't be, there isn't a breach, no investigation required, that'll be it. He won't refer it on to me.
I'm not saying that we need to investigate.
I understand, yeah. Any other comments on the public interest test from members? No. The second matter that
Chair, can I come in? I've got another meeting to go to for 1 o'clock. Can I ask a question? If I left, how would it leave?
That would be fine, Councillor Evans. That it wouldn't affect the committee being collated or not. Okay. The second item, Chairman, is again a consultation that the Ombudsman is carrying out on principles of good administration. I've attached to the report the consultation paper, and there were originally 6 principles, and he is going to, or proposes, to add another 2 principles, which are principles 7 and 8. So 7 is creating good quality records, and 8 is managing records effectively. He has issued this consultation document with the Information Commissioner. Something similar has happened in England. I personally think it's a very good idea to include those 2 extra principles. I think it's a very useful consultation paper. Of particular use, I think, are the examples that he's given of poor administration, if you like. In particular, members may note that on page 47 of your paper, under the example for a county council, and the Information Commissioner's ability to fine public bodies. And indeed, that was a Welsh council that was fined £130,000 for disclosing, for losing records, frankly, and highly sensitive records at that. So the Information Commissioner is not afraid to use his powers in order to make sure that councils comply with good record management.
Okay, anyone wish to comment on this paper? No, I just one comment that I think the good quality records and managing records effectively certainly will be of benefit to the Standards Committee. Taking up on Gareth's point about records for reports to the Ombudsman, anything that we can work with is a help to the Standards Committee.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Paragraph 3.3 then is once again back to the Assembly, and the Assembly's Finance Committee is currently undertaking an inquiry into a review of the powers of the Public Services Ombudsman for Wales. Again, I've attached at page 60 the Ombudsman's thoughts on increases in his powers. It'll be interesting to see what the Finance Committee make of this, and whether or not there are increases in the responsibilities for the Ombudsman. As regards private healthcare, Councillor Edwards, that was just that was the statutory basis on which the Ombudsman's powers came from, and private healthcare wasn't included in it. So I guess with the increase in use of private healthcare, it's something that the Ombudsman is asking whether or not he should be allowed now to look into these matters. The consultation exercise here is the Welsh Local Government Association has given evidence to the Finance Committee, and the Welsh Local Government Association will be responding to this consultation exercise. But I can certainly make, I've got a contact at the Welsh Local Government Association, make him aware that if that's the wish of Standards Committee, that private healthcare is included within the within the areas of responsibility for the Ombudsman. Yeah, in Wales, the Public Service Ombudsman for Wales is responsible for healthcare as well. So there's I think in England that's slightly different, but in Wales he is responsible for complaints made against the NHS, certainly.
My only concern is obviously this isn't a public service in that sense, so it seems odd that the Public Services Ombudsman would look after private healthcare. That feels like perhaps it's just the way that Wales has been set up. But he mentions a recommendation that it would be looked after by the Parliamentary Health Service Ombudsman. So presumably he's saying that perhaps the Healthcare Ombudsman in England would extend their reach into Wales. I don't know whether...
No, I don't think that would be possible because healthcare is a devolved function.
It does say it's been recommended that the remit of the Parliamentary Health Service Ombudsman should be extended to cover the whole private healthcare sector. Is he saying in England?
He's talking about in England there, yes.
I see. Okay.
Certainly worth following up, isn't it?
I'm not convinced it's an ombudsman thing in the sense it's not a public service, and if we go down the road of saying anything provided by a private company that is similar in some ways to what's provided by public organisations, I'm not entirely clear why health would be one rather than other things. So where would we draw the line? Why is it an ombudsman issue? This feels like it's... Have we not got any legislation to cover things like that? I mean, I know it's healthcare, but it's effectively a transaction. Someone's bought healthcare, and if that isn't being done appropriately, I'm not sure whether that's an ombudsman issue.
So,
All he's saying, that he has jurisdiction over social care and hospice care. What's the difference in the end of the day?
Because they're provided by councils through a private company, presumably. The council has a responsibility for the provision of those services. They don't have the responsibility for the provision of healthcare through Bupa, say. In fact, that's someone opting out of what the council or the public sector provides into another provider.
I think, excuse me, Chairman, is paragraph B, top of page 63 on your papers, that's the type of case that he's considering whether or not he should have the power in future to look at. So he says, recently there was a case that I could not resolve where a patient had been treated by the NHS. So that certainly is something he can look at, but then was privately self-funded, and then again in the NHS, the patient sadly died. I was unable to investigate the private funded healthcare element, I'm adding words here, of the complaint. So I think that's the situation that he's wondering whether or not he should have the powers to investigate. But how you would limit that, if you like, i.e. there is some sort of public input at the beginning and public input at the end of the process, it is difficult.
Chair, also in that same paragraph, clearly there is a need to reform legislation where a patient chooses to be treated in both public and private sectors, that the complaints process follows the citizen, not the sector. That's maybe of use.
You're saying that you suggested that we make a proposal
Yeah,
towards giving him greater powers over
yes, I do.
the private sector.
Yeah, that's my...
Is that something that we can, that the Standards Committee can comment?
Certainly can, and I can feed in to my contact at the Welsh Local Government Association on that, Chairman, yes.
Do we need to say?
Yes, if you could take a vote on that, that would be useful, please.
Okay, if we can,
And I move.
all those. Gareth, are you again?
I'll couch it in the terms then, Chairman, that the majority of Standards Committee members, okay. The next item, sorry. The next item then, and the final item is the Standards Conference, which will take place at the City Hall in Cardiff on the 20th of October. I've had some more information on this that was given to me on Friday. It's proposed that the conference will start at 10 a.m. I think it's a Tuesday, the 20th of October. The Chief Executive of Cardiff Council will welcome all members on that day. Then there's a session with the Nick Bennett, who's the Public Services Ombudsman for Wales. And then some workshops, and the workshops will go either side of lunch, looking at social media, whistleblowing, community councils, effective standards and ethics committees. And then the final session, which will take us to 3:30, there will be a panel discussion with Peter Davis, who's the President of the Adjudication Panel for Wales, Lynn Cadwallader, the Chief Executive of One Voice Wales, and Jan Williams, who's the Independent Police Complaints Commissioner for Wales. Now, this agenda may change, Chairman, but that's the at the moment that's what Cardiff Council, who are arranging this conference, are considering the day will comprise of. Yeah. Perhaps nearer the date, perhaps our June meeting, if members could give some thought as to whether or not they want to attend the conference on the 20th, that would be very useful to me, and I can then give some numbers to Cardiff City Council of how many and who will be attending from Monmouthshire. I envisage that we will have, I think, five places to for the conference.
So,
Alan?
no, I certainly would like to go because I've obviously got so much to learn still, so it'd be very interesting.
Yeah,
So-
I certainly endorse that. I attended the one in Llandudno last year, and I thought it was absolutely excellent. The workshops in particular give you an opportunity to talk to other standards committee. And we mentioned before about reactive and proactive. It was amazing to me to find out how many standards committees are actually proactive. Yeah, it's a really good conference.
Okay, Chairman, I've taken the notes of Mrs Cameron and Councillor Edwards' names. As I say, perhaps we could firm up on that at our Standards Committee in July. Sorry, in June. I do apologise. Those are my reports, Chairman, unless anybody else has any other matters to bring up, then that concludes my reports. Just for information, the next Standards Committee meeting is on the... Chairman, we haven't got the dates at the moment, but we will, or Sarah will email out the dates for, I think, the next 4 Standards Committee meetings. I think that will be useful if we can. I know that Mark Sutton would like to have advance warning of committee dates so that he can put them in his diary. Just on the dates of Standards Committee and the timing of Standards Committee, at the last meeting of the full council, some of the groups have their group meetings on a Monday morning, and some of the members were wondering whether or not Standards Committee could be moved from the time of 10:30 to an alternative time, maybe 2 o'clock. I don't know how that suits Standards Committee members. Perhaps wasn't Councillor Jordan affected because it was the meeting of the Conservative group, wasn't it? Right. I just put it out there, Chairman, just to ask whether or not 10:30 is a good time for members, or whether or not they wish the time to be moved.
I think you were particularly concerned.
As long as we stick to Mondays, I'm all right at the moment. That's my non-working day these days. I would marginally prefer as early in the morning as possible, but I 10:30 is fine with me.
Would an afternoon meeting be okay with you?
Yes, I'd probably prefer the morning, but no, I could make it.
I think, Chair, we had this discussion last year, didn't we, about the times meeting, days meeting, and we almost unanimously agreed that it would be a Monday and preferably AM.
Sarah's just told me that the next meeting's on Monday, the 8th of June.
Okay.
And that will be 10:30. As regards reports that I'll do for that meeting, so I'll do a report, just have a look at my notes here, on training attendance and annual reports. Okay, I'll do a report there. I am keen, Chairman, that if there are matters that Standards Committee, if you want to put in a work programme of what you want me to do, that would be very helpful for me. So if there are specific items that you would like a report on, perhaps if I suggest through the Chairman and Vice Chairman, if there are matters that you particularly want me to report on, if you let me know, and we can get together a work programme, because I think that would be beneficial, personally.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. About a year ago, we mentioned this gift register as well. It was going to be updated from a book into a sort of a computer program. I think that to be presented at the meeting, we can just have a look through it. It's also the public can be satisfied that we're doing that on their behalf as well. So, and any other suggestions?
There is also... sorry,
and we've talked about standards, and certainly there's been talk about some councillors who are not attending meetings. Would it be the remit of the Standards Committee, where attendance is falling, to discuss sort of not individuals, but a policy on lack of attendance?
Put me on the spot there. Well, I think it would be, yes. I do. I think that it's extrapolating the information. We've got the information as a council, but it's extrapolating it. That's the difficult part of it. But members need to be mindful of this 6-month rule. In that, there is a member can't be disqualified unless he or she misses meetings of the council for 6 months or more. So there is a, if you like, the statutory bar has been set, so we can't interfere with that. But I don't see anything wrong in somehow us getting some information together for you to show attendance at committees. The information is already there. So, for example, full council, any member of the public can see by going onto the website, by looking at the minutes, who's attending. But I take Gareth's point. It's putting that into a helpful and easy to read format, which would be very useful.
I think ultimately it would be good to get to a point, as I mentioned, they work for you, where you can look up your councillors and see a profile of perhaps their voting record, meetings they've attended, what they stand on. You know, I mean, they have quotes from Hansard and things on, you know, and things like that. But as you say, because statutory, I'm not sure what we can, and you know, whether we wanted to or not, whether there's anything we can do with attendance records at the moment. But I would be very keen to make them available so that people could look at them in an easily digestible way. And councillors may even make, you know, people who are standing for re-election may be opposed by people who use that information to undermine them, perhaps, in a useful way.
Chair, what worries me is the quality of some of the meetings. You know, it's over. You know, if a councillor is doing his job properly, he is going to be attending the main council meeting. He's going to attend the select committees that he's been appointed to. You know, there are other, in inverted commas, insignificant committees, which, you know, so I don't see why they should sort of qualify a member that he is, just because he might have just attend that particular insignificant meeting and has missed 6 months of council meetings and select committees. It seems to me, yeah.
I'm sure it's possible to list attendance at meetings, meeting name, whether he attended and so on, so you can then divide up what's the most important ones and what's not so important.
The town clerk issues us a list of the meetings we've all attended and the percentage of attendance. You know, basically there are 3 meetings per month that we need to attend. And so it's easy to calculate. I appreciate, Rob, it could be a lot more difficult at county level because of things like seminars, you know, how you know, many of the seminars are important and the attendance at seminars quite often is poor. You know, if you only get 10 or 11 members there or 20 members there, it's only half the council. And it's poor. I think there should be, there's got to be a way of making it more important that members turn up.
Do we, I mean, as we talked about, this is on the agenda in this white paper as part of that, and that's a very big body of work and presumably would take some time to come to fruition. Would we want us to take this forward perhaps and think about what sort of information on particular members we would want to make available to the public? I mean, this feels like it would be quite a large body of work for an officer or more somewhere to make this sort of things available on a regular footing.
It's all on computer, Gareth, surely.
It is, but compiling it into an easy, because you'd have to think about, as you say, there's things like what counts as a meeting that people should attend, that they might attend. You'd probably need to sort of develop some kind of way of, you know, what counts as the overall average, who do you include, who do you don't, do you do things differently for, you know, for cabinet and things like that. So there's a lot of detailed stuff behind the general principle of just making it transparent. So it feels like it would be quite a lot of work, but it feels like it would be quite an important body of work as well.
I've just had a little note, sorry, I've just had a little note here passed to me by Sarah, and the council is going to buy some software called moderngov.com, and it may ModernGov, is it? Yeah, ModernGov. Yeah, it's called ModernGov, and Sarah seems to believe that may aid us extrapolating this information. So it may be, with the advent, when we get this software, purchase it and get it up and running, that this information will be more accessible for for Standards Committee, but even more importantly, in my view, members of the public. Yeah.
In that case, is it desirable for someone from the Standards Committee, perhaps the chair, perhaps the vice chair, perhaps someone else, I don't want to put you on the spot, to work with the people acquiring the software to think about the types of things that we'd like to be on it and to make sure that we're using it in the way that the Standards Committee would like at the same time as it was implemented?
Put it on the agenda for the next meeting. Okay, that's the end of the meeting then. Thank you for everyone for attending and for your contributions today. We'll see you all again on the 8th of June at 10:30 hours. Yeah. Thank you.